Welcome to your 20-minute podcast with David Brower, where we do our best to give you useful information in 20 minutes or less. Now, here's your host, 5-time Voice Arts Awards nominee, David Brower.
Thanks, Allan. This is David Brower with your 20-minute podcast. Our special guest is Karen Walker from One Team Consulting in Jupiter, Florida. She's an executive coach, consultant, speaker, and author. She focuses on helping senior leaders create internal strategies that support their organization's external growth. And she's been doing this for a while, very well educated from Texas A&amp, Columbia. Karen, welcome from Jupiter, Florida to Loveland, Colorado. How are you?
Thanks, David. And I am particularly happy to be in Jupiter today, where it's a little warmer than it is the rest of the country. And I'm also not on an airplane today, so that's another piece of good news.
Well, that's a good thing. That's one of the things I laughed out loud when I was looking at your website, and it says she resides in Jupiter, Florida, although she can most often be found aloft in seat 2C.
Yes, that's my home away from home.
That's great. So how did you, I know you started a company several years ago. How did you get your start in doing all this magic training that you do?
Yeah, so I came to my consulting work in a little different path, I think, than many people who are in it. I'm actually an engineer by degree. I started working at a big Fortune 100 company, not so unusual, but I noticed some people leaving and starting a new little tech startup down the street. And so I inquired and went to work there when there were about 100 people, and we hadn't shipped any product yet. And that turned out to be Compact Computer. And
wow.
I was fortunate to be part of the senior team that led that company from no revenue to about $15 billion by the time I left. And, you know, from my little party of one to had hundreds of employees on my staff and thousands of contractors and consultants worldwide in charge of all the global infrastructure. And I did that for about 14 years. And then I realized I needed something different in the rest of my life. So I took a little time to figure out what I wanted to do next, and I went into consulting. And I met my now husband, who's a psychologist, and he was working with CEOs on organization growth and leadership. And so we formed this company together, and I've been doing it ever since.
Called One Team?
Love it. Yes.
$15 billion in 14 years. I got goosebumps on that. That's just absolutely remarkable ride. Wow.
It would have been something if we'd known it was going to happen, but we didn't know. So it was like every day there was so much more to do than anyone could possibly do. And we were at that time the fastest growing company in American history and the fastest to $1 billion. So
wow.
It was wild and crazy and amazing. And it was a great fortune to be part of that, but to be part of a high performance team that made it happen.
Absolutely. So now with that experience and you and your husband joining forces to create this consulting company, One Team, now you get to kind of pay that forward, and as a matter of fact, and another way of saying it, in helping executives and CEOs and better organize their teams?
Yes, I've been working in the tech sector primarily, not exclusively, primarily, working with people who are leading growth companies. I'd say that's the one thing all my clients have in common. Is that they are C-level or executive level, and their companies are growing. And it's sort of like once you find your product market fit, then what? So working with them to make sure that they're able to deliver on the promise that they're making their customers,
right,
by creating these internal strategies and making sure that their teams are functioning, that their executives are aligned, and that people are really pulling in the right direction altogether in order to deliver. And to support the growth that you're able to create through your product market fit.
Well, and you not only want to satisfy the customer, you want to satisfy the stockholders, right?
Exactly. And that's the one thing about CEOs. There's no shortage of people they need to please, right? So there's the board, the investors,
exactly,
the shareholders / stockholders, employees, customers,
you name
friends
it,
and family.
So when you're working with C-level CEOs and such, I imagine, I'm guessing here because it's way above my pay grade, to be honest with you, but I would imagine it's a fairly small universe that, with their success, creates a lot of word of mouth and referrals for you. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. It's actually a fairly large group of people, at
Okay.
least in terms of what one consultant can handle.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But yes, from a referral standpoint, that's been the basis of the growth of my work over the years,
Yeah.
having successful clients. And also, this is a group that tends to move around from time to time. I think the average tenure of a CEO in the U.S. today is 4 years, or only really 20 quarters. So
Oh my gosh.
there's a fair amount of movement, and when someone leaves company and goes to company B and takes me with them, then of course that gives me 2 clients instead of 1.
What a treat.
So, yeah.
That's one of the many things I like about your website. Unlike so many people in business, no matter what the business, on their websites almost always say testimonials, and you say results. I love that. That's, I mean, it's just a word, but it signals quite a different message than most websites I've looked at.
Oh, I'm thrilled that you picked that up. That's my engineering degree, right? I'm a problem solver in my core, and success for me is solving problems, and that's about getting results. And like when I work with teams, I tell people it's good to have a high-performing team. It's good to have a team that's functioning well.
Sure.
But it's not about the team. It's about what the team can do. And so I'm really focused on results, and I think that's part of why I've been able to be successful as a consultant is if the clients don't get results, then well, in fact, that's how I contract with people.
Okay.
I contract not on an hourly basis, but on here's what needs to occur within the business, and here's how we'll know if it occurs, some measurements.
Oh, brilliant.
And then that's the basis of the work, not you need 60 hours of me over the course of the quarter or something.
As a CEO, knowing right up front that we're not talking about billable hours, we're talking about a specific goal, target that we want to reach. Here's how we're going to reach it, and here's how we're going to analyze the success of that, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that you're just speaking their language. That's freaking brilliant. Pardon my French. So the many services you provide, and there are a lot, from public speaking, CEO coaching, consultations, executive team development, strategy planning, mergers, acquisition, leadership development coaching, change management. One of the things you talk about, though, are the internal teams. And so do you work specifically with individual teams within a company to see if they play nicely together and what you can do to help them improve?
Yeah, it's definitely part of what I do for my clients. So I typically will be called in at a C level or an SCP level, something like that. I'll work as an advisor and coach for that individual, and then typically we'll work with their team as well. And it's usually not the technical stuff that gets in our way. It's how we work together. It's the cross-functional pieces.
Sure. Stuff
in the white, sort of the white spaces on the org chart. And so making sure that people are clear about what they're doing and why, and then how to go about executing on that from a processes, behaviors, tools standpoint. And then, importantly, how they hold themselves accountable for getting those results they set out for. It doesn't mean that you don't ever change, right? You can set a goal. We often do, and then in 6 months we find out something in the market changed, or something didn't go the way we thought, or we have a new opportunity. And that's great. But know that that's what's happening, and change your plans, change your goals, so that you can reach sort of these new milestones you set for yourself. But make sure that you have an accountability plan. Otherwise, you're just having the so what moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody needs that. Absolutely right. So in a team, I'm just going to focus on a team for a minute. So in a team, obviously there has to be some accountability. Obviously there has to be some communication, trust, vulnerability, those kinds of things to get people to work together, to be on the same page and go towards the same goal. How do you orchestrate putting a team together like that? Or if there's already a team there, how do you kind of vet them to see if, maybe that person's on the wrong team?
Yeah. So that's one of the strategies that's in my book, No Dumbing Down. And No Dumbing Down is all about creating an atmosphere and creating teams that are able to get the results because people are able to work at their potential. And what happens, I think, often is we have teams and organizations because we recognize we need to get things done cross-functionally. And to do that, people have to work together, a team. But a team can only function at the level of the lowest performing member of the team.
Yeah.
Sort of like the weak link, right?
Sure.
And so what happens is we get A players, we get our stars, they show up to work on the team, and they realize they can't work at their potential because there is one or more members who aren't playing at their level. And of course, that happens for a lot of reasons.
You bet.
One is just, skill and talent. One is differing, goals or priorities. People might be focused elsewhere. And sometimes it's just that they don't have the team skills as opposed to the, individual superstar skills to work together.
Yeah.
And so there are all kinds of reasons that these things happen, all of which can be addressed. And sometimes you just have the wrong person on the team.
Yeah.
That can be addressed as well. But I think at the basis of all of this is respect. You have to respect the other team members and their skills. You might or might not want to have a beer with them after work, but you have to respect their skills.
Yeah.
And when you do that, then almost everything else is possible. If you don't have that, then very little is possible.
Yeah. You've got to have trust, all those things. So your book, I love the title of it. Again, as an engineer, you have magic with words. It's really cool to read through some of your stuff. So no dumbing down, because everybody wants a dumbed down book. Here's CEO management for dummies. I mean, why would you do that? No dumbing down, a no-nonsense guide for CEOs and organizational growth, a no-nonsense guide. I like that. So it's a book for a company's senior-most leaders, teaches them how to do a job only they can do. And so you've worked at that level, you speak at that level, you coach at that level. Obviously, this is something written in their language that they need to have their hands on. Yes,
and that was very much my intent. The audience for the book is clearly for senior-level leaders in an organization. And I think it's also really useful. Some of my work is sort of developing that next level of leadership in growth companies, because as companies grow, certainly the senior leaders need to be able to take on more. And as a result, they are able to do less than what they were doing last year. So we have to develop that next generation of leaders to be able to take on that work as well. But I think it's important for everyone to know what's important for your senior leader, what's important for your CEO. What are they focused on? What is the language? What language do you need to speak with them?
Yeah.
And that's some of what I try to cover in the book. And there are certainly other books as well. But
if a CEO is leaving every 4 years, just hypothetically, are they trying to build their replacement, or are the replacements trying to build themselves? How does that assumed transition play out?
Yeah, so that's a really important question, and I think the best CEOs do both, right?
Yeah, right.
They are constantly developing themselves. They're in areas where they can grow and be challenged and be ready for whatever that next opportunity is. And the people around them should be developing themselves as well. Now, that's not to say that needs to be true for everyone. I'm certainly working with people who've quote, made their money, if you will, and are really just doing work they love, and with people they enjoy doing it with, and they're not interested in anything else.
Yeah.
That's fine. Know where you are and where you want to go, right?
Right.
But I think developing both yourself as well as your staff is important. And one of the ways that senior leaders do this is by I call it taking time to think, or learning to levitate. So it's sort of stepping out of the day-to-day and looking at the bigger picture. And people don't do that because we're so busy running from meeting to meeting, solving problems, making decisions. And if you'll step out a little bit, you will not only bring perspective to your job and a deeper understanding of what's important, but you'll allow your staff an opportunity to step in and to develop. I'm not suggesting you throw problems over the wall at them.
Right.
There's definitely a continuum between doing it all yourself all the time and not doing any of it. Right? But how do you support and develop it? I think that's a key component of any leader's job.
Yeah, if they're able to step away and allow people to begin to flourish on their own a little bit more because they feel a sense of trust and inclusion, that's got to do nothing but help everybody.
Exactly.
So what do you recommend a CEO does to step away other than taking Tai Chi with your husband?
Yes. Well, that would be an excellent thing. I've enjoyed it myself. I think that, for one, at the base, a CEO has to realize that they are in charge of the calendar and that that if they're not, someone else will be, right?
Right.
It's not that the calendar won't fill up if you don't take charge of it. And you have to put this time to think, this time to look at the big picture, this time for strategy. You're responsible for making sure that time happens because no one else is going to put that on your calendar.
Right.
And it's not enough to have an annual strategy retreat, not in today's fast-moving, fast-paced world.
That was my next question, yeah.
Yeah. And you need to do it on both a team level. You also need to do it on an individual level. There's a great story, a guy named Ross Mason, who's the founder of a company called MuleSoft. You may know. They make APIs. But they were recently purchased by Salesforce for $6.5 billion.
Hello.
And Ross is the founder of this company, and he started with a line of code. And he grew the company. He eventually realized that he needed a CEO who was not himself. So he brought in a CEO. And he says every year, at the end of the year, he sits down, he puts his feet up, and he really thinks about what does MuleSoft need from me next year, and where can I make the most impact? And that's where he focuses.
Brilliant.
So he's consciously stepping back and figuring out where sort of the highest and best use of his time is. And I think that's an important thing for all C-level leaders to do. Where can you make the most impact with your time? And it's often not the meetings you've got on your calendar to go to every week, week after week, that just sort of become rote for you. You really do have to carve out this time to think the bigger picture and the bigger thoughts, and then to apply yourself in the areas that need you.
Well, and I think, candidly, that's brilliant advice for any business owner at any level. I mean, if they want to have a better than average chance of growing their business and taking it from $100 to $15 billion, they've got to step away at some level, right? And figure out that big picture for them. So I think that's brilliant advice for anybody in business.
Thank you. And I would say to all the visionaries out there who can see things perfectly and clearly, and I know you're there because I work with some of you,
right.
You also have to take time to think about how do you translate that vision so that the people who aren't, 10 steps ahead of everyone else like you are, so that they get it and understand it and can apply it.
Makes sense.
So there's all kinds of goodness that comes from sort of stepping out of the day-to-day.
Brilliant advice. And you've got podcasts, you've got a blog, you've got press, you do public speaking. What's the best way for C-level CEOs, companies of that sort to reach out to you and have a conversation?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, the first place would be just to get to my website, which is KarenWalker.us. And there's all kinds of information there. On all the social media platforms, I'm Karen Walker US. And if you want information about the book, you can find that on the website or just go directly to nodumbingdown.com. And that will take you to one of the many places that you can purchase the book.
That's terrific. Karen, thank you so much. This has been so informative for me, and I know for our listeners as well. And congratulations on your ongoing success, and we wish you nothing but continued success, and hopefully you sell all the books that need to be sold to help these CEOs before their 4-year window opens up again.
Terrific. Thanks so much. I enjoyed it.
Listen to Your 20-Minute Podcast with David Brower on the go. Downloads are available on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, any podcast app, and on our website at davidbrowervo.com/Your 20-Minute Podcast. Until next time, thank you for listening.